Welcome, everyone, to a brand new podcast. My name's Mischke, and, well, I guess you're going to get that name through your thick skulls, or you're going to find yourself another form of entertainment. Do you follow? Tom, that's how you're going to start out? This new career of yours, this brand new podcast, that's how you're going to start out? What the hell is wrong with you? I'm sorry. I am sorry. Any way we can start over. Any way we can do this again. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry about that. I don't know where that came from. A dark place, obviously. Some shadow side of my psyche that I refuse to look at. I do want to make a good impression on you right out of the chute. Is there time for that? Have I blown it completely? I want you people to love me. Not like. Love. Why? I didn't get enough as a child. That's really the story behind my whole career. Just a child who needed more love and couldn't find it. So he went out into the world and went to the people and said, please, please love me. My name's Mischke. I'm coming to you courtesy of Hubbard Broadcasting, heralded national broadcasting operation stations in D.C., New York, New Mexico, Minnesota, Illinois, Seattle, Phoenix. This is another in a series of Garage Logic productions, and I welcome all of those who listen to the other GL podcasts here at Hubbard. I guess I should pass along that the biggest difference with me compared to some of the Garage Logic stuff is I don't delve into politics at all. Nothing against that topic. It's just that there's plenty of that out there already. I'm assuming you guys are covered, right? Plus, what I have learned over the years is you really don't anger people as much when you just stay away from politics altogether. They either enjoy the show and listen, or they don't and they turn it off. And there's something joyfully refreshing about that. I remember back in my radio days, I was at KSTP when it was a very political station, and I would learn of a death threat. A death threat. Then I remember watching one talk show host feel that she needed to be taken out to her car by a guard after the show. And I remember seeing, and this is all true, I remember seeing a dead animal arrive in the mail for another talk show host. Now, this was all politics related. I said to myself, it's a plumb damn good thing I don't like politics very much. I don't need this in my life. One time I was sent, and this was interesting, one time I was sent a pair of women's underwear. That was odd. I don't think that represented anger, but I don't really know what that represented. I'm not 100% sure what that was about. I just forwarded it to Tom Jones. But no, I don't anger people, generally. If people don't like me, they find me inane, they're bored, they move on with their lives. So there won't be political discussions on this show, and not really a lot of sports either. Again, I think there's plenty of sports out there. You can find that. I think you're covered. What do I like to talk about? I like to talk about people, mostly, because, well, we're all people. We're all people. And because of that, we're all very much alike, I think. Despite what you might see out there, we're actually very much alike. I mean, replace the term people with the term bear. For a moment, imagine we're all bears. We'd be astoundingly alike, wouldn't we? Replace people with whales. If we were all whales, we'd be a lot alike. We're people. That makes us alike. We have a connection there, species-wise. Consequently, I just expect us all to get along swimmingly. By the way, in case you are wondering, I do have a political bent. I do. And I'm hoping it's the kind of politics we all share. I belong to a little something I like to call the decency party. In the decency party, no matter what side of the ideological spectrum you come from, you form your arguments with the idea that your views represent being decent to the greatest number of people, good to them. And you argue in a way that any opposing view would represent being far less kind or even cruel to others, and thus that's a view that ought to be avoided. Now, I'm sure every one of us is for kindness and decency and goodness, so that makes it a big umbrella party. It's a big umbrella party, this decency party. We can all have a beer together, all of us. And I'm buying, which I never do. Talk to my friends. I never do that. Yeah, you look at the world out there, folks, and if you come up with policies based on being a good man or a good woman, decent, you'll bring in other enthusiastic party members pretty quickly. Every single one of us knows what being a good person is. We have found good people throughout our lives. We know what it is. We know it. They've been written about. They've been sung about. They've been talked about. We've met them. Some have been our parents. We get this. So join the human decency party with me. Be a good soul yourself and be a good soul to others. And the world will be a better place for everybody. All right? And if you happen to wholeheartedly reject the decency party, well, I'm having a hard time believing you're a real fine addition to this planet, camper. You sound like a real downer, frankly. Give me back that beer. You buy your own. Again, I don't care what you call yourself, conservative, liberal, populist, communist, fascist, anarchist. I don't care. I'm not interested in that BS. I'm just looking for decency out there, man. Give me human decency, because every one of us knows that's what this world is in need of, always has been, always will be. So make your arguments for what you want in this world, politically, based on decency. And know that no matter what side of the aisle you're on, if you're wanting to create a kinder world out there, you're thinking wisely. Here's to you. Cheers. Cheers. And that's about all I'll have to say on that matter. What else can I tell you? I like to have a lot of fun. I'm kind of a little kid at heart. Never did grow up, really. I tried being a bona fide adult for a spell. Back when I first moved into that part of life, I thought it was going to be way better, but it wasn't. Being a kid was better. Yeah, that's where all the fun was. So as an old man now, I play around quite a bit. Can't really help myself, and I'm going to get in trouble for it, but there's nothing new there. I also like to get serious, and I like to talk about interesting topics, many of which will come courtesy of some author and his or her book. I'll swing wide. I'll swing both ways with this show, into the zany, into the quirky folderol, and then into the serious and somber, just like life itself swings. This show is going to be a lot like life. I'm a big life guy. You people into life? You into this whole life thing? Life became important to me when I shot out of my mama's birth canal into the waiting arms of Dr. Wetzel at St. Joe's Hospital many years ago, weighing in at 11 pounds, 6 ounces. My old man saw how big I was, and he was so damn sure I was going to be a football player that he told my mama my initials had to be TD. He said, I don't care what you call them, but the initials have to be TD. Now, I never did play football, and my daddy died a broken and bitter man. But TD, those are still my initials. And by the way, I have gained 164 pounds since that afternoon at St. Joe's Hospital, and I'm thinking of adding to that weight, onward and upward. I told the Hubbards I'm going to be big, big. Anyway, where the hell was I? Oh, yeah, life. Life. It's something to marvel at, ain't it? It fascinates me, all of it. At least once a day I sit back, I stop thinking about much of anything at all, and I just marvel at the whole damn thing. Creation, people, weather, the sun, cars, buildings, yo-yos, parachutes, the funny things kids say, and the sad way we all die. I think about all of that. It's all so overwhelming in its strange wonder and complexity and mystery. The whole thing just baffles me. Not in a bad way. It's intriguing. It's beguiling. It's strange and wonderful. Anyway, after marveling for a bit, I usually take out the garbage, wave to the neighbor, and stroll down to the corner 5 and dime and see what the kids are getting in their pack of baseball cards and look at the cards, see if I know the players, maybe share a piece of gum with them till their parents pull up and say, get away from that guy, which is always so sad. I always hate that. You ever look into the eyes of a mom or a dad when you're around their little kid and they look terrified? Jimmy, get in the car. How old are you? Get away from them. I'm a little kid, really. I just grew up. Get in the car, Jimmy. This show is going to look at the world, folks, and we'll see what jumps out. What'll be on each week is what jumps out. And whatever it is, we're going to marvel at it. So what jumps out with this first show? Well, I'm going to be straight with you. I was really worried about possibly boring the living hell out of you with this first show. There were 3 ways I could easily have done that. And I was worried sick I might choose one of them. They involved either having a certain filmmaker on as a guest, and if not this guy, a fella I knew who created a photography book, and if not that guy, a man I knew who wrote a recent biography. Now, the filmmaker was a fella who made a film called Paint Drying. You're saying to yourself, I'm making this up. I am not. I have not made up anything here. The filmmaker put out a 10-hour film called Paint Drying, Charlie Shackleton, white paint drying on a brick wall. I was going to have him on just to ask him about that. I asked him when I was knocking around having him on why it was 10 hours. Couldn't you do a 2-hour, hour-and-a-half paint drying film? And he told me, he says it took all 10 hours for the paint to dry. White paint drying on a brick wall. I thought about having that guy on the show, and then a wiser angel of my nature said, don't do that to the folks. So I moved on to the photography book guy. It was a photo book of the state of Nebraska. I'm not BSing. You can look this up. The book is titled The Least Interesting Place. Matt Steinhausen is the photographer. The Least Interesting Place. Matt takes pictures of places in Nebraska, only Nebraska. He clearly needs marketing help. That might have been why he contacted me. The Least Interesting Place is a title that he knew would be box office poison, but he liked the raw honesty of it. This is a genuine photography book. The pictures are not comedic. They're intended to be beautiful, and some of them are. It's just that they're all pictures of Nebraska, thus the title. And the last way I could have bored you to the point of really ending up comatose was having on the author of a brand new biography that I just read about in the Times on former President Jerry Ford. A biography of Jerry Ford, the Nebraska photo book and paint drying film of biographies. A serious historian took on the life of Jerry Ford. A publishing company assigned this historian the Jerry Ford biography, which, based on my research, is not the holy grail of biography assignments. I think it comes in just a little bit below a biography of Spiro Agnew and Jared from the Subway commercials. With this Jerry Ford biography, I learned 9 different historians turned it down before this fellow named Richard Norton Smith said, hey, I got nothing going. I'll tackle it. Jerry Ford, hey, it sounds interesting. I don't know how many of you have ever spent any part of your day, your week, month, thinking about the presidency of Jerry Ford. I never have. So I would not be the target audience for Richard Norton Smith's efforts. I'm sure Jerry was a great guy. But here's the thing. He was just, well, it's in the name. It's in the name. He's Jerry. He's just Jerry. Even the name speaks to him just being some guy. He was never elected. He was assigned the presidency, keeping the seat warm between Nixon and Carter. Could I call him the most inconsequential president in the history of our nation? I think I could. Have you heard of the famous Gerald Ford Presidential Library? Neither have I. I'm told it's sort of like one of those little libraries that you see on the cedar posts in residential neighborhoods. Anyway, if you research what Ford was best known for, he was known for tripping and falling routinely, or bumping his head when stepping out of Air Force One. He actually tripped and fell down the stairs of Air Force one time, and his reputation for being a clod grew in large part due to Saturday Night Live having fun with him. All the clumsiness. Chevy Chase made a career out of it. He had a field day mocking Jerry Ford. So you have an average guy named Jerry, never elected, just kind of given a temp job, not terribly left-wing, not terribly right-wing, just a guy, nice guy, not really offering any strong personality that anyone can recall. I mean, he sort of had the personality of some dad in your neighborhood growing up who drove a station wagon that had a bumper sticker saying, "Have a nice day." He was one of those guys. But despite the fact that I'm painting this guy as just this dad, this average guy, this innocuous guy, despite that, and I struggle with this, I really do, there were 2 assassination attempts on this man, folks, during his presidency. 2. What the hell? How do you hate Jerry Ford and hate him enough to want to murder him? My favorite part is both would-be assassins were women. What did Jerry Ford do to piss off American women? Maybe he reminded them too much of their husbands, who also had names like Jerry, and were also kind of inconsequential in terms of their presence on this earth. I think they saw Jerry Ford's presidency as the equivalent of their husbands' lives. Just sort of watching football all day or talking about different places around town where you can get a really good burger. I think the women took out their rage on the president instead of who they should have been targeting, their own spouses. For me, it is very difficult to imagine getting worked up enough over the presidency of old Jer to want to gun him down in cold blood. It's like wanting to kill Pat Summerall or Fred McMurray. And those 2 assassination attempts on Jerry Ford, they were 17 days apart. 17 days apart. If they attempted to kill Jerry Ford every 17 days for his entire presidency, he would have faced 52 assassination attempts, which amazingly would still not have been the record. You know who holds the record? Guess who holds the record? I'll wait. Fidel Castro. And how many attempts did Fidel Castro face? Get ready for this, folks. You're going to run to your computer and look this one up. Go ahead. 634 assassination attempts. 634! Come on! Seems impossible to survive that many attempts, but Fidel did. We are so far beyond lucky here. You survived 634 assassination attempts. God is looking out for you. But why is God looking out for Fidel Castro? Someone want to answer me that? You ever say to yourself, maybe we have God all wrong? Maybe he's into completely different stuff than any of us thought he was. I don't know what he's into, really. But 634, I mean, I'd like to write a book titled Incompetence, the 634 assassination attempts on Fidel Castro. I would have liked to have been the life coach for all the assassins, for all those assassins who failed so spectacularly. I'd have wanted to have a retreat center where they all could gather and I could help them out. Talk about their extraordinary low self-esteem in the wake of their abject failures. Most of them, of course, would have been CIA operatives. Depressed, ostracized, ridiculed. I had him in my sights, boss. I swear I did. Or at least the guy looked like Fidel. I don't know. I was hammered. We all were. It's Cuba. You're supposed to be. How would you help a dejected guy like that feel better about himself if you were a life coach at the retreat center for the failed assassins of Fidel Castro? First, I think you'd have to maybe break them down a little bit. I've read about this practice where before you build a guy up, sometimes you gotta break him down. you'd say, pal, you screwed up bad. You screwed up bad. It is embarrassing. I mean, Oswald had a moving target and tree branches in his way. And he not only got a headshot, but he was so sure he'd be successful, he got some guy to film the whole thing. Zapruder and Oswald had breakfast that morning at a little cafe in Dallas. Oswald said, "You're going to win an Oscar for this one, Abe." And Abe said, "What role in the film are you playing, Ozzy?" And Oswald said, "I'm the patsy. I'm playing the patsy." And in order to play that role, of course, Abe, I have had to study under a lot of other patsies. I'm a method actor, so I immerse myself in patsy life. I live and breathe being a patsy. On the set, I make everyone refer to me as the patsy, exactly the way Brando would do it. That's the first lie I've told right there. I want to identify that lie so you know that everything else has been true. I'm sorry for going on and on about this. I'm just passing along that I'm not having Jerry Ford's biographer on the show. I'm going in a different direction. I'm going to have an author on who wrote a book, yes, but it's a different kind of book, different kind of author. And I'm going to get to that right after this break. I read a quote once about the appreciation of old things that had their day long ago, but then the world moved on. When you come across that thing later on, that thing that was a big deal in its day, and you look at it now, there can be a kind of sadness in the experience. It's over for this thing. Something new has taken its place. When one goes back and holds those old things that have seen their day, it can be more than nostalgia. And here's where a quote I heard one time comes in. Hanging on to old things can be a shelter from the relentless onslaught of the new. I always love that quote, the relentless onslaught of the new. That's sort of the story of our modern age. I think that's a decent description of life for many of us who have lived a big enough chunk of life. It's been a relentless onslaught of the new, hasn't it? The new thing endlessly replacing the old, making the old obsolete. Time relentlessly marching, clearing away the things we love for the new things others are going to love before it becomes that old thing they love. There's a man here with me, folks, who has authored a book on one of those things. It's an item whose time has come and gone for the most part. Amazingly, my guest has written an entire book on the cassette tape. The story of the cassette tape. It's fascinating where this little thing came from, what it did to the world before moving into the history books. It changed more than you know, more than you can imagine. About a year or two ago, I bought an old pickup truck. And as I was driving home with it, I looked at the dash and I smiled. It had a built-in cassette tape player. I thought the fact that I had to roll down my windows by hand was retro enough, but the cassette player sort of sealed the deal. I found some cassettes at a garage sale and I bought them. And in my truck now, when I drive through town, I now rest inside a shelter from the relentless onslaught of the new. I want to welcome to the show Marc Masters, who has written a book called High Bias, The Distorted History of the Cassette Tape.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were able to join me. You know, Mark, a book takes a long time. It's a hell of a lot of work. It can be a pain. It's involved, way more involved than most people even imagine if they've never tackled a book. It's quite an extraordinary undertaking, and yet you decide out of all the topics out there to pour your writer's heart and soul into the lowly cassette tape. Well, I mean, you could have chosen fold-up paper road maps. You could have chosen phone booths on street corners. You could have chosen overhead projectors. You could have chosen typewriters. You went with the cassette. Why?
Well, none of those other things I own anymore, but I still own a lot of cassettes. So that's part of it.
You do?
Yeah, I never really let go of it, even at the times when it seemed like nobody had them anymore. But they've actually had on a small, very, very small scale, a little bit of a comeback in the past decade. So that's part of why I was interested too, because I know young people who would listen to them or buy them. And I thought, well, if this is happening again, maybe they would like to know a little bit about how it got here and why it was so important before.
Now,
And
before you go on here, a comeback. I'm well aware of the comeback of the LP. There's really a comeback with cassettes? Are you
a much lower
it
scale
isn't
than
a
the
little
LP.
fringe thing?
Oh yeah, it's fringe. It's fringe. Yeah, it's much lower scale than the LP. But it's significant in the sense that it's given some people an opportunity, some really small labels, an opportunity to sell something physical without the expense of the LP. The LP is very expensive to produce right now and expensive to buy, and cassettes are still cheap like they've always been. And if you got however small your audience, if your audience likes physical media, you want to sell them something without breaking the bank, the cassette's a much better option right now.
Give me a sense, because I have no idea. Give me a sense of what an LP costs versus a cassette. If in fact, and I believe this is what you're saying, is there are bands putting out new music on cassette.
Yeah, I mean, the standard LP in a store right now on the consumer level is like $25 is almost the minimum, and sometimes you can pay up to like $40 for a single LP. And you rarely see a cassette go for more than like $8-10. A lot of times, if you buy it directly from the label online, you can get it for like $5-6. Manufacturing them is super cheap right now. You can get a few hundred made for like $2 a piece, whereas vinyl, I think it's 5 times that at least the wholesale cost.
Of course, when you buy the cassette tape, you then you then have to find a place where you can play it.
Yeah, that is the trick. And that is a much harder thing to do than to find cassettes, is to find cassette players, and not being many being made anymore. And the ones that are being made aren't the highest quality things in the world.
Well, now, wait a minute, though. It can't make a comeback. A cassette tape can't make a comeback if no one's also offering something to play it on. If you're having to go to the Goodwill, a thrift
Right.
store to find something to play it on, how much of a comeback can they have?
No, you make a good point. It's a sort of a half comeback in that sense. I mean, I think it appeals to people who are a little jaded about streaming and wondering if it's really helping support artists just to send some money to Spotify every month and the artists maybe get pennies from it.
Well, what I'm fascinated by with your book is the fact that this piece of technology did, in fact, bring with it a revolution. I don't think people fully grasp how much this changed the world. I didn't before reading your book. See if I got this right, and you may not have done research in this area, but my sense of things is the 1950s is the first time you can take a ride in a car and reasonably enjoy some music. It's on the radio, and you can reasonably enjoy some music driving down the road. I don't believe you could do that with any quality in the 30s or 40s. Is that your sense?
That sounds right. Yeah, you're right that I didn't specifically research that aspect of it, but that's the general sense I get. At the very least, in terms of it being accessible to everybody.
Do you know where Motorola got its name?
Oh no, I don't.
Motorola got its name because way back, I think maybe in the 30s, they wanted to put music in cars for you to drive around and listen to. And Motorola comes from motor and Victrola.
Oh, makes total sense.
So there was going to be a little Victrola going in your car while you tooling around.
Right.
But I think the 50s is when that takes off.
Mm-hmm.
When is the 8-track available to enjoy?
Yeah, the 8-track is actually somewhat simultaneous with cassettes. it's a little vague as to exactly when that was fully invented. I mean, there were basically cartridge style tapes that became 8 tracks that were happening a little bit before cassettes, and they were boosted as things to use in cars, also in planes. Like Lear behind Learjet was a big booster of putting 8-track players in planes so they could play music for people from.
But I remember as a kid getting in a guy's car, my older brother's buddies, and they would have the bands on store-bought 8-tracks. And believe me, if they could have gotten cassettes at that time, they would have preferred that. I think obviously there were cassettes, because the cassette goes back to the early 60s. It was invented for dictation. But I'm talking about music here. 8 tracks where you can hear a band and you have it in your car on an 8-track player. They're before cassettes are being played in a car.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And the cassette improves on the 8-track, and it improves on it. Why?
Well, mostly the ease of use, I think.
You can't rewind an 8-track.
Exactly. Yep.
That's a pain in the ass.
It is.
You got to just keep listening, whether you like what you're hearing or not.
Yeah.
But the cassette, for all intents and purposes, is a mid-'70s phenomenon in terms of exploding, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the 8-track was never really marketed as a way to be able to record music, too. That was one of the big things with cassettes.
Right.
So,
right. The 8-track did not bring a revolution. The cassette tape brought a revolution. And why? Because of this strange ability to both create your own personal music with it and buy music that your favorite band put out, the ability to have it in a portable fashion. The boombox is a huge explosion.
Yep.
The Walkman, bootlegging. There's all these things that happen with the cassette. See if this is accurate. This is my take. I'm frustrated these days by the fact that there's not an agreed upon way to pass around music, to share music, to walk into a party and play music. It's all over the place, and I miss the days. I don't care what medium we come up with. I just miss the days when we were all on the same page. And boy, we could say that in more ways than one. But in the music world, tell me if this wasn't a sweet spot moment. So you have your cassette player in your car. You have the cassette player in the house. You have it at the person's house who's having the party. You have it in the boom box down at the river where the keg is. You are making your own cassettes, party mixtapes, and handing them out. You're sharing a special mixtape just with your girlfriend on Valentine's Day. There is some sense that for a brief shining moment, everybody was on the same page. Everybody knew what to do with them. Everybody had a place to play them. Everybody had the wonderful ability to just create something on their own. My mother would stick a cassette in the tape player and put it under the dining room table when the 10 of us would have dinner.
Nice.
And she would just record the sound of 10 people having a meal and talking. Now, at the time, we thought, oh, that's not very interesting. But 25 years later, it was.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like there was a sweet spot there. By the way, there were people over the years who really did try to put a LP, to put in a record player in a car and make that work.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful picture of Muhammad Ali. I think he's Cassius Clay at this point. He's in his car playing 45s. It's attached to the dash, and he's got his 45s, and it looks really cool. Yeah. I really wanted one of those.
Yeah. I guess the problem they ran into is how do you keep it from skipping unless you make the needle so heavy that it's going to damage the record,
And speaking of skipping, a lot of people, loved that LP. They loved going to the record store and buying the album, but the cassette was protected. It was protected from getting wrecked. I mean, they could get wrecked, obviously, but even if you liked the sound better on your LP, all it would take is a little warping or a scratch, a needle scratch, and then the cassette was suddenly better. So it was a sweet spot there, too. I used to go to parties. My friends hated me because I would I would be running the music and I wasn't putting the records back in their jacket and I wasn't holding them the right way. And by the end of the party, they were all over the floor and guys were spilling beers on them and walking on them. And I didn't really care because I wasn't really into sound quality. I
Mhm.
just was into the song. I didn't really care. I mean, my stereo in my house was in the window where the sun shone, and every record got warm. Every record had waves in it. It would just be like surfing, watching the needle go.
Right.
So the cassette was durable. It's also
Mhm.
way more durable than people think, isn't it?
Oh, very, very much so. Yeah. No, I've had cassettes from the 70s and 80s that are still playing, still working fine. And there's also the
From
kind
the
of little,
70s and 80s.
yes.
Wow.
Yep. And there's also the kind of little added bonus that if a record scratches, it's done. What are you going to do? You can't do anything about
Right.
it. If a tape gets a little warbled or garbled or whatever, there's still the opportunity you might be able to fix it. You might be able to splice it or just stick your pencil in and wind it. And
Oh, yeah. I used to go inside them and repair them.
yep.
So there was this wonderful moment, and then it's gone. But I want to go over the key moments because they kind of entertained me. Let's start with the boombox. The boombox is before the Walkman. The boombox to me, just to me, I'm not saying anybody else has to take this view, but it's the equivalent of the guy driving the Harley down the street. There's no interest in what anybody else thinks.
Hmm.
It's about the person.
Hmm.
So the boombox, the guy walking down the street cranking this as loud as can be, he's pretty damn sure everybody must love this because he does.
Right.
And there was that weird vibe with the boombox of playing it loud as can be, walking down the street, and if people don't like it, well, you don't have any taste.
That's definitely one of the things that people objected about it. Fact that it was kind of in your face and a little bit taking up other people's space and stuff. But the flip side was that, like, say, with something like hip hop in New York, never would have spread if people didn't have boomboxes on the corners listening to the latest rap songs or their own raps. As a way to since they couldn't get on the radio, they play it on the corner.
Yeah, one thing I appreciated from your book, there was a sense that the tape created a way for people who didn't have money to become a big deal. Are there examples that you can pass along of bands we might not even have had without the cassette?
Oh, sure. I mean, Metallica never would have existed without putting their first couple things on cassette and bypassing labels and bypassing radio and just trading it around because it was a big thing in the metal scene to trade tapes, put your address in the back of a fanzine and people will send you a tape. And they took advantage of that to get their first tape enough of a buzz that then labels had to pay attention to them. So that's one example. Almost every early hip hop DJ especially would not have gotten to where they gotten without the tapes of their performances being spread around and them eventually selling them themselves on the street. Grandmaster Flash, DJ Jazzy Jeff, all these people from New York, Philadelphia, LA, that all happened because of cassette tapes. Really, there's almost no genre that happened in the 70s or 80s that didn't take some advantage of the fact that cassettes could get things around faster and build this sort of outsider network of people who didn't have to rely on expensive studios or, who at labels and things like that.
That feeling out there with a lot of record companies that the cassette, or there was a feeling, the cassette was going to destroy the music industry because it was going to take all the money out of it. People were going to just steal the music and pass it amongst themselves. And they were in a panic about it when the cassette came along. There was real panic. And they put out, according to your book, they put out these edicts that you guys realize you're breaking the law. You can't be doing this. You can't be trading these things. You can't be recording our music from LPs onto your little cassettes and then recording them again and again and handing them to friends. You stop doing that right now or else. And it did nothing, shockingly. It did nothing. But did it hurt the music industry?
They came out with studies acting as if they were losing billions of dollars a year, and none of that was proven on any study outside of the industry itself. So I don't think it was a big a deal as they thought. And it also didn't sort of account for the fact that it helped spread music around. Kind of like radio had the same problem when it first came out. Labels were scared of it because it's a free way to listen to their music. But it only ended up helping their artists and getting their names around. And I think quite a few people who would tape records from each other ended up being fans of those bands, buying their records, going to their shows. So I think it was much exaggerated, the problem. Because not only did it catch on so quickly, it just sort of shattered a paradigm. I mean, people had never really even thought about walking around listening to music or, like trading music in ways that besides borrowing records from each other. There were just so many things that it changed in terms of the way people think about music.
There's a wonderful image when the Walkman comes along, wonderful image in your book. And the Walkman, my fear is there are people listening who might not know what a Walkman is. What was a Walkman?
So a portable cassette player that you would hook a pair of headphones into, sort of the precursor of listening to music on your phone now.
Yeah, I remember I was living in Nice, France, 1984, had this Australian girlfriend, and she had a Walkman, and she wanted to know about American music. And so I introduced her to Bob Seger.
Nice.
She had one end of the headphone in one ear, me in the other, lying down, listening to Turn the Page.
Nice.
And I said to myself, I think this might be as good as it gets in this lifetime.
Sounds pretty good.
Bobby, thank you for providing the soundtrack. But here's a fascinating thing from your book with the Walkman. I love this. So when I was a little kid, I used to walk home from school, and sometimes I'd imagine there was a soundtrack playing because in all the movies I liked and all the TV shows I liked, when anything cool was happening, there was a soundtrack behind it, which made the cool thing seem cooler. So I would try to imagine, like on a sunny spring day, coming home and I'd hear an orchestra or something, and there was sort of a desire to create the soundtrack experience in real life. Well, the Walkman did it. And people describe in your book this sense of, I'm in a movie.
Right.
I'm in my own movie. I'm walking through the city, hearing the best song I've ever heard, and it's the soundtrack to my day, and I'm a living, breathing movie figure.
That's
right. A beautiful image.
It is. Yeah, and it's amazing now that to read about, we're so used to that concept now, but to read about the first few people who tried it and thought it was almost as if they were having a drug experience or a religious experience or something, this idea of being able to walk around while listening to music, which it seems funny now, but The
vibe, I'll tell you what the vibe was like in reading it. When I put the book down, I said, this is like the people who can only see in black and white, and then they get the fancy glasses and they put them on, and they're seeing in color for the first time, and they're almost weeping.
Yep.
that is what it was like, hearing these people put this music on and walk around the city.
That's right.
So boombox, Walkman, bootlegging. It allowed people to go to concerts and record them and then hang out at a party and say, hey, you want to hear what these guys did the other night? 3 songs they'd never done before. Listen to this. And I don't know what the quality was like, but if they were like me, they wouldn't have cared. And the bootlegging thing explodes. I mean, again, the revolution just in that alone is extraordinary. And this ability to go once again, I'm sure illegally commit crimes, but end up in these wonderful moments with this beautiful music. I loved that part of the book. And again, there's this battle. We can't be doing that. Let's get these guys. And there's a wonderful scene in your book of the sound guy for the Grateful Dead coming into some room after a concert and seeing a guy with a tape he had used to record the Grateful Dead concert. And he ripped it out of his hands and tore out of the room.
Yeah.
And of course, this is with the band that would become famous ultimately for allowing that.
Yep. No, they got smart about it pretty quickly. They realized, this is going to help us in the long run. I think a lot of bands could have taken cues from them and should have taken cues from them, because it's only, they can credit a lot of their success to the fact that they made this decision that let's let the fans do this and let them feel like they're part of this, and it just made fans more loyal and it spread their music a lot farther.
Yeah, but you can't connect those dots right away.
True.
If you're playing all over the country and people are just recording it for nothing and then going out and disseminating it, I don't know that you can sit there unless, certainly not on acid, you can't, and say, I know how this is going to work in our favor. I'm sure this is going to actually make us more money. It did, as you say, but I don't know that you would know that. But the thing about the bootlegging, again, everybody knows about bootlegging, but in your book, the way it becomes, I was just blown away by the photos. I'm thinking bootlegging, there's a little recording thing down by your hip, maybe, or a little mic you got stashed in a backpack. But it's eventually the Grateful Dead allows whole wings of the concert halls, of the stadiums, with hundreds and hundreds of microphones in the air and special equipment, and people have it's like an orchestra pit full of microphones. And I had no idea it became that technologically advanced.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's like looking at the press at a media event or something when you see all those guys with microphones standing in that one section of the show.
And of course, the band must have been looking at these guys just again saying, Jerry, are we absolutely sure this is a good idea?
Right. Right. And but of course, before all that, they were smuggling tapes in, and all the things you were talking about before. They came up with all kind of crazy methods to, hide a reel-to-reel deck in the bottom of somebody's wheelchair, or bury the stuff under the floorboards before the show and dig it up afterwards. And
my favorite was the guy who put the mic stand down his pants and had to pretend he had a bum leg because he couldn't bend it.
Yeah.
What I also learned is teams of people would bring in different pieces of equipment and then meet, because they were trying to get pretty decent equipment in there, and then they'd meet and put it all together and record and hope not to get caught. But there was a fun kind of renegade pirate vibe to all of that.
Yeah, I think for some of them, once it became official, it wasn't as fun anymore. They liked the smuggling aspect of it,
So when we fast forward to today, I don't understand this exactly, but bootlegging is kind of dead.
It does seem to be, yeah, compared to those days at least, for sure.
I don't hear about it. I don't read about it. I don't. There's a sense that if you go to a concert today, there's no one saying, I got to preserve this and bring it home and play it for Dave. I was trying to figure out why. Now, you don't address this, I don't think, in the book, but I was trying to figure out, now it's even easier to record. Why aren't we doing it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think one part of it is the fact that people are more interested in putting clips on social media than recording whole shows, and sort of the instantaneous "I'm here right now, look at me" thing, as opposed to documenting it and kind of archiving it.
I guess we'll go back to 1984 again in France with my Australian girlfriend, and I went to a Bob Dylan, Santana, Joan Baez concert. Years later, I'm at KSTP radio, and I mention this. And some guy calls me up and says, hey, that sounds like a pretty powerful memory. You want a copy of that concert? I said, what? He says, yeah, I got everything the man's ever done. We pass them around. There's a whole network of us all around the world, and all together we've been able to grab everything he's ever done in public. We got it all. He ended up getting it from Holland or something. He sent me that concert. It was rather extraordinary. Now, we're not going to have that anymore. That's over. That's finished. That's done. It arrived in the mail in a cassette. It was beautiful. So you're a cassette guy still. Can you give me the big reason again?
Well, part of it is, I mean, the things that I grew up with and bought or taped as I was getting older, I'm an archivist kind of guy, or you could call me a pack rat or whatever. I like to hold on to things. So those cassettes meant something to me then, and they still mean something to me now. And I like still being able to hold on to them and look at them and listen to them. But then there's also, as I was mentioning before, these smaller labels, especially like some people who put out more experimental type music, which is what I lean toward. They're relying on cassettes now as their way of putting out physical media. And so I still like buying tapes from those places to be able to listen to that kind of music. Yeah.
In the early 70s, in the United States, vinyl album sales topped cassette sales by 20-fold. They were 20 times more popular. By 1981, that factor was just around 2, only twice as popular. By 1982, cassettes were bigger than vinyl. Somebody made a lot of money. Holy smokes. Did this fella who invented the cassette in 1963 make out okay? How's that guy doing? Is he still with us?
He passed away a couple years ago, unfortunately. But he had a long life. He was in his 90s. So.
It would have been fun to do his eulogy, just bring up a tape player and play the eulogy through the microphone.
Yeah, and ironically, he had a hand in inventing the thing that killed the cassette, the compact disc.
We were talking earlier about the durability of the cassette. It's not uncommon at all for cassettes to go 30 years, I've learned.
For sure.
30 years is not uncommon. And I don't think people necessarily would have given them credit for going that long. Now, CDs come along, and I remember being told, well, they'll last forever. And that turned out to be a lie.
That's a lie, yep.
There are people who are hunting all over the world and have been for cassette tapes, because no matter where you are in what country, you are going to find cassette tapes of music that is only on this cassette tape. It's not anywhere else. It never was on an LP. It never was on anything else. And the music will be lost if the tape isn't preserved. So there are people who devote themselves to this, like almost archaeological digs, finding this all sorts of obscure world music, thousands and thousands and thousands of examples. But you gotta go in the back of a live food market in Syria or something and find a box in the corner. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. That's where they are, right?
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, in a weird way, you could say that cassettes were even more important in non-Western countries because they had such a stricter government and label policy in terms of what music actually could get heard. And so the only way some of this music could get around, especially the regional styles, was being dubbed on cassettes in these kiosks by, local record labels or just one guy who heard a band and recorded them and dubbed them and sold it. And so it didn't end up on vinyl or CD. It was only on cassette.
It's a great title, High Bias, The Distorted History of the Cassette Tape. And I would have never believed there was enough there to write about, but you proved me wrong. It was fascinating.
Oh, thank you so much.
Who's your publisher? Is it North Carolina Press?
That's right, University of North Carolina Press. That's correct.
Well, congratulations on the book. Nice work. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm really glad to hear that. I'm really glad you took the time to read it. I appreciate that.
Take care. Hope to talk to you somewhere down the road.
Yes, the same here. Thanks so much, Tommy.
Sorry for this hiss. This is an old cassette. It's an ad for the spectacle shop. That's an eyewear store, optical store. They have 4 different Twin City locations. What do they all have in common? A rare in-house lab with the most sophisticated technicians and machines creating an unmatched precision lens for you. That combined with a greater variety of designer and vintage eyewear frames than is available anywhere else in this entire region of the country. It's owned by a military veteran who got his start working with soldiers who had damaged their eyes in combat back in the Vietnam War era. Eyes have been his focus ever since. The Spectacle Shop has been voted the best eyewear store in Minnesota every single year that the Star Tribune has had a reader's poll. If you haven't been there, aren't you just a little curious?
Folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed Marc Masters, his book, High Bias, The Distorted History of the Cassette Tape. My hope is there will be a centerpiece interview of some sort each week on this show. Doesn't have to be an author, but it's going to be quite often. Surrounding that centerpiece interview will be other musings, other thoughts, various ponderings, meandering soliloquies, you know the story. Odd diversions, inexplicable tangents, obscure references, odd moments of silence, strange visitors who pass by almost unnoticed, followed by a scream from next door, resulting in police intervention. We'll see what happens. I don't know. I don't want to predict too much of this thing. Some of you may be aware that I myself have written a book. The book is on the otherworldly presentation of winter in the North Country of the United States, and how people who don't live here have no idea what winter culture is. People who have not immersed themselves in a northern winter don't know that planet, what it presents, the extraordinary otherworld of it all. So that's a book called Winter's Song, A Hymn to the North. What you probably don't know, though, is that I just bailed out on a new book that I had wanted to write where I had hoped to reveal the inner thoughts of hockey goalies and soccer goalies, when the ball or the puck is on the far side of the field or the rink, when all the other players, are on that far side. You no doubt have seen this when you're at a soccer game, when you're at a hockey game. The goalies are all alone because all the action's on that far distant part of the rink or the field, and they have nothing to do as they wait for the action to eventually wind its way back down to their side. Well, I was going to work on a book addressing what these guys think about during those moments. They're not in the game anymore, and yet they're on the field and on the rink. They're there, but they're not involved. They're spectators almost, really, like the rest of us. What are they thinking about? I wanted to find out the random things that might pass through their minds during those stretches. I thought it'd be interesting. Figured some of them might think about their mothers briefly, or their growing up years, or where their car's parked, or they might wonder about a mole on their arm that looks a little wonky, should get that looked at. Still more might see interesting shapes in the clouds or get lost in some ad for a mortgage company. I just wanted to know, that's all. I couldn't believe no one had asked them about this before. But I had to shelve the book. Publisher backed out. I think he said, "We're concerned sales will be sluggish." That was the word, sluggish. That's all right, I don't mind. Gives me more time to work on this show, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put heart and soul into this show. I'm pretty damn fired up about it. That happens when you start anything new. Oh, that's the best time, when the new thing comes along. Now, there's one last thing I want to get to regarding this new show. I would like to have an audience participation portion with this program. There are a couple ways I'm going to ask you to participate. I'm serious here. Please think about this. Call or text this number any time of the day, night, weekdays, weekends, doesn't matter. Call or text this number, 651-321-8949. 651-321-8949. 651-321-8949. You can call, leave a voicemail, or you can text anytime, or you can email tdmischke@yahoo.com. Email tdmischke@yahoo.com. I'll get back to you, and more importantly, from time to time, I'll include your efforts on this show. I miss talking to listeners, so let's have you pass along your number via the texting option or emailing option, and I'll be the one to call you back. I'd like to record our exchanges for this program from time to time, hoping that's okay with you. I want to eventually develop a callers list. You see where I'm going here? A callers list, a list of people I can pull from time to time to visit with on this program. It's just another segment I want to have. I want to feature. So if you want to get on a callers list, then text me your number or email it to me. Tell me your name, and I'll get a hold of you, and we'll see what the hell happens. I don't know. And lastly, I'm going to close out every single show the very same way. Every single show will end the very same way, with a prayer. This will be with each and every show. Right at the very end, we'll all pray together, all of us, for world peace and an end to all human suffering. Not going to do that to you. No, let's find another way to wrap up the show. How about with a call for donations? You can send in your money and feel a whole lot better about yourself as a listener. I'll spend it wisely, tell you what I bought and what you could have purchased if you weren't such a giving, selfless soul. Now, we're gonna find a way to end this show each week that has some value. I think this time we'll close out with a moment of philosophical insight, but we're going to have it delivered in the drive-thru lane of a fast food restaurant. I think that's a novel way to wrap up a podcast, certainly podcast number 1. Philosophical musings passed along to workers at drive-thru fast food joints. Anyone can order a burger. Give these people something else. Give them something valuable. They're making the same money either way. So sometimes Don't order the fries. Just give 'em some insight that you found from some great philosopher, some brilliant mind out there. Pass it along to 'em. Tell 'em it's on the house. You think it's going to bug 'em. It's not. What they get bugged by is the repetitive, I'll have a Whopper, I got a large fry. That's what bugs 'em. This will be a beautiful moment.
How may I help you today?
Hey, I was thinking about Thoreau today. How he said happiness is like a butterfly. The
How
more
may I help you today?
He said the more you chase happiness, the more it'll elude you.
Excuse me, sir. How may I help you today with your food?
I was mentioning that Thoreau said, turn your attention to other things. It's easier to think of the butterfly as...
Excuse me, sir. There's people behind you. Either order some food or keep going.
I see.
Can I help you?
Yeah, I was thinking about Henry David Thoreau today. He said happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will elude you. But if you turn your attention to other things, it'll come and sit softly on your shoulder.
Okay.
And I was thinking I'll pass that along to some of the folks who are working today, trying to get through their day. Pass along a little philosophy.
Okay.
Any reaction at all?
No.
What about that idea, though, of happiness being like a butterfly? Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The idea being if you chase it, you're not going to get it. But if you just rest and just relax, boom, it comes and rests right on your shoulder. So there's a little something for you to take with you today.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you for stopping at Caribou. Do you have a Perks account with us?
Do I have a Perks account?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
No worries. What can I get started for you?
Well, I was talking to a worker at a neighboring place about Thoreau and his take on happiness, but I contrast that with John Stuart Mill, who said, I've learned to seek my happiness by limiting my desires rather than seeking to satisfy them.
All right. Can I get you anything to drink?
Well, I was just thinking I'd give you something this time around. Little bit of philosophy.
Well, I appreciate it.
Why always be taking and taking and taking? Why not every now and then give you something that might actually help your day, give you a little boost?
I definitely don't get that very often here. Thank you.
You have a wonderful day.
All right, thank you. You too.
Thanks for choosing Arby's. What can I serve for you?
You know, it may be that when we no longer know what to do, we've come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we've begun our real journey. I think the mind that's not baffled is not employed.
Let me know whenever you're ready.
Oh, I'm ready. I was ready when I came out of my mama's birth canal, ready to take on life. How about you?
What can I get for you?
I was just passing along a little philosophy on this lovely sunny afternoon. Figure you're getting paid either way. Why take? Why not offer you a little something?
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, welcome to McDonald's. Will you be using the mobile app today?
Would I be using what?
The mobile app.
No, I've never used a mobile app in my life.
Oh my goodness, you'll be save money. But okay, how can I get for you?
Well, I thought I'd pass along a little wisdom.
All right, what do you like?
Life is amazing, and then it's awful, and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, why, it's ordinary and mundane.
Okay.
And what I say is breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just
right.
living a heartbreaking, soul-healing, amazing, ordinary existence.
I gotta get for you, sir.
Well, I don't need a damn thing today. I'm just
I
hoping
know.
you might need something, some wisdom, some philosophy.
Gotta get for you, sir.
Well, nothing, really. How about you? You need anything?
No,
Oh, good. We're content, you and I.
I'm good.
I'm good, too.
My life is the best life that I have.
Your life is the best life?
Yeah. I had everything. My life is the best.
I have the best life, too. We're a couple of lucky SOBs.
Already.
All right, well, congratulations to you for finding your best life, and I did all right myself.
All right. How can I get for you?
Well, as I say, I don't need a damn thing. How about you?
You don't want no burgers, no fries, no nothing?
I don't need anything, man. I've never been this happy. How about you?
No, I'm good. I'm just working here.
And you're feeling happy, too?
Oh, yeah.
God, it's great to be alive.
Hey.
Yeehaw!
Have a good day, sir.
All right.
Well, that's going to do it for this show, folks. I'll talk to you again next week. Special thanks to Kyle Sheely, executive producer of the Garage Logic Network.